You got your mama's sunshine, you got your daddy's rain. You're like a piece of heaven in a hurricane. And it's bubbling over.
Hey everybody, I hope you guys are
like
doing well.
sweet champagne.
We really appreciate you. I don't know if we say that enough, but those of you that are listening, that are sharing, that are part of the community and part of the conversation, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being a part. This works with it's a partnership, I think, between us and you. And hopefully we are having these conversations in our workplaces and in school or wherever you might be. And hopefully that's making a difference, right? Well, today we're going to talk about something that I believe will make a huge difference. And it's something that's important to talk about, something that is very applicable to today's day and age. And that's living with differences, difference of opinion, difference of political stances, difference of, and we're not going to get political, but we are going to talk about the actual idea and the thought process behind conflict resolution. And how do you fight well? How do you fight well? And when do you know when it's important to fight? When
there
is
you
it?
go.
When do you know it? How do you know? I should say when it's time to walk away.
You can't fight every battle.
You can't fight every battle.
You don't have enough energy to do that.
And you don't want to win every battle.
No, you have to sometimes lose a battle in order to win the war.
Yes.
Well, I was thinking, where does conflict come from? I wrote in my notes today, and it comes from a reaction to a perceived threat. And I think that the idea of perceived threat is really important because sometimes it's not really a threat. It's just something that we perceive as a threat. And somebody might have a different opinion. Somebody might be, they might just give you a bad vibe. They might say something that offends you. Maybe it's somebody you don't even know. Maybe it's somebody that you saw in an interview on TV or on YouTube, or maybe it's somebody in a podcast. Maybe it's us. I don't know. But sometimes we feel like fighting, but that doesn't always mean that we should.
Well, you know what? I think today, because of a lot of circumstances, there's a lot of angry people out there today.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of opinions. I mean, out there on so many topics today. And some people are very, very passionate about their opinions, and more so than ever before. For example, with COVID, we have opinions about masks. Do you wear them or don't you wear them? Some people get angry when they see you with a mask on, and just the opposite. Some angry when you don't wear it. Vaccines can be a hot topic. Transgender issues, oh my goodness. LGBTQ issues, health issues. So many people with opinions out there.
Religion issues.
Oh, a lot of division within the ranks.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think now in a cancel culture, it's even worse. For some reason, there's a lot of anger, and a lot of people think, well, if I don't agree with you, I'll just cancel you out. I've never quite seen a day like this. And so we're going to have to learn to live with differences. And I think that's what this broadcast is about today.
Well, I wrote down two safeguards that we can all use, and I don't want to get right into it, but I just want to see what you guys think about this. Two safeguards, and I call this the pregame, because when you don't prepare beforehand, usually when you encounter a trial, it's already lost. You've already lost, right? If you're not prepared. And so I think it's really important for us to be prepared beforehand, before we get into a conflict, before we feel that anger rise up, before you feel that heat in your body, right? And so these two safeguards that I wrote down is one, and this is something I got from actually being in therapy, is check the facts. Check the facts. Am I or am my family in real danger right now? And if so, then you might have to do something about it. And it comes down to the second thing. What can I do about that danger? What is in my control and what is out of my control? Because if it's out of your control, why are you so angry about it?
Yeah. Well, Josh, you said too, try to prepare beforehand. Holidays are coming up soon.
Right.
And sometimes we realize that we might be sitting at the table with some people we don't get along with, or at least we have some huge difference in opinions. Right. So I think you're speaking wisdom when you say we need to probably prepare ourselves in prayer, get ourselves mentally ready to say, hey, these subjects could come up, and if they do, this is the way I'm going to handle them. Isn't that what maturity's about?
Well, Thanksgiving's a week away, and I think it's easy for us to feel pressure. You know, it's funny how my wife and I were talking about how just bouncing from family to family, it's pressure. So we made it easier on ourselves this year. We're going to go to one family one day and another family the next day and just make it easy, simplify it. But how many of us, we don't simplify? We worry about what people think. We worry about expectations. And then you add on top of it those Black Friday deals, man. And then you gotta worry about, what shopping you're going to do on Friday and missing those deals. And so all this pressure just kind of adds up, you know?
I'm trying to think back with holidays. I don't know if you guys are there yet, but where was the transitional point when we stopped going to our parents' house for Thanksgiving? They started coming to ours. There was a point to where our kids got grown and we go, now we're having them at our house. And I remember the grandparents showing up at our house, but I don't know what caused that decision.
That's
But
funny.
anyway, that's neither here nor there. Now, as I said in the previous episode, we're talking about differences today. Some people expect the church to agree with culture on subjects, on real hot topics. And as I said a couple weeks ago, I think it was in the podcast, because of the ancient book that we center our life around, that's just never going to happen.
Right.
Because we center our life around concepts like God created people, male and female. God teaches about the sanctity of life. God has things to say about divorce. I think there's things in the Bible about diet and vaccination maybe. Well, not vaccinations, but there are some things that people misinterpret in the
Right.
Bible about that. So I think that we're going to have maybe more opposition than some, because as Christians, we really, really center our life around a book.
Yeah.
And some of the hot topics out there today are very culturally driven.
Right.
And so,
Well,
I got a lot to say
I like
about how
that.
we resolve this.
I like
but
that thought because we center our lives around the book. We don't center the book around our lives. And so many people have a cut and paste theology in their life, right? Like they cut and paste. They take parts of the Bible, they put them on their wall. They say, we live by that, but not by that one. We live by
Right.
this one, but
Yeah,
not by that one.
it's true.
What
Pick
about
and choose.
What about the part where Jesus says, love your enemies, pray for them, right? I mean, who does this? And we are called to do this. I told you guys on the way up, I don't think I have any enemies right now. I have people I wouldn't want to have breakfast with, but I ultimately don't have anyone that I hate, that I wish ill on, right? Because when you live with hate or you live with unforgiveness,
For sure.
which could be a precursor to hate, when you live with that, it affects you.
Oh, it does.
But shouldn't every Christian out there that's trying to live by the book be able to say, I hate no one? And if you do hate someone, you really need to take that to the altar. But going back
Well,
to
the
the
book
idea,
says you're supposed to.
well, that's what I said in the book. Well,
Yeah,
that's last week's message.
Isn't that something that you have to, and this is something that I think we go out there, and I love the conversation because we're all created different. We all have different experiences, different backgrounds. You're going to come in with a preconceived idea, and I think the book gets us all on the same page and gets us to agree to a certain thing. Then you see people come in, and then they try to give relevance to something that doesn't even apply in the
True,
book.
true.
You know, one of the things that I always talk about people with, they talk about the past, and they'll go, "Well, if I was in the past, I'd do this." I go, "No, you wouldn't." Because
Right.
what's that called? It's called presentism. You'd say the way I am now, I'd go 150 years, and I would tell them what I think. No, you wouldn't,
Right.
Because it was different then. And so as they do that, they try to make us apply these things current.
Times change. But,
Yes.
But going back again about the book and how, as Christians, there are some opinions that we can't change for sake of unity or peace. But the way we present them, and like Josh said, the way we stick to our convictions, there's a way to do that without offending people. For example, crazy verse in Matthew 10, where it says, Jesus says, don't think that I came to bring peace on earth, but I came to bring a sword. He said, for I came to set a man against his father, a daughter against his mother, daughters-in-law against their mother-in-law. And of course, you have to have that in context.
Right.
And so those are tough verses. But again, if I'm going to be at a Thanksgiving dinner with someone who's an atheist and likes to argue, as Josh said, I have to get prepared beforehand. And when some of these things come up, if they want to argue, I just say, that's my opinion. But you know what? We'll probably never agree on it. But hey, how about another dose of that pumpkin pie right there? You kind of change it. You do it in love.
Right, but isn't there just two different types of people there? Like if I'm at Thanksgiving with my family I'm not bringing up topics that are going to set the whole table at war.
You're not, but other people
No,
might.
but I know other people might. But that's what I'm saying. That's the difference of people. Like there's people,
Right.
I would say, that are fighters by nature, and they want to bring out the worst in people. Then there's the peacemakers. What does Matthew say, right? In 5:9, going, and that's not counter to your verse, but it says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they're going to inherit the kingdom of God." And I think there's two types of people where we live by conviction, but we do our best to keep peace, man. We're not trying to stir the pot. We got to live by our convictions. And by living by our conviction, it is going to rattle the pot and it's going to make people upset. And I know that.
So going along with this, my wife and I are not teaching our kids not to fight. We're not. Because there is an appropriate time and place where you have to fight. And what I mean by that is if my kid is in danger,
for sure,
I want her to fight for her life. Yes. There's a big difference between fighting someone because you hate them or because you've been hurt by them and fighting for your own freedom, right? I mean, the goal of fighting should always be to free yourself from trouble, from
oppression,
a bad spot. Yeah. If somebody attacks my family, why do we have a gun in the house? Is it because I want to kill somebody? No.
Did you have a gun in your house?
Yeah. Of course I have a gun in my house.
Right. That's a whole
that's a whole
controversial topic. Right now, somebody's upset that you said, but you're right.
I don't care.
No,
there's a reason I have a gun.
No, right.
Because there could be, I'm not saying there's going to be, that's not right. There could be a moment in time where using a gun would be the proper amount of force that I need to protect my family.
Right.
And that's it.
But do you want to have to use that gun ever?
No,
you
I
never
don't want to ever have to use it. I hope I never have to. I do like shooting targets and cans,
Right.
And I like to hunt birds sometimes, another controversial subject. But at the end of the day, I know I don't want to hurt anyone.
Right.
But if somebody's coming to hurt my family, I'm going to stand up. You think about Jesus, right? Jesus was angry at one point.
Yes.
And what did he do? Flip the tables in front of the temple.
He made a whip too.
And yet he didn't sin.
He didn't sin. Yeah, he made a weapon. He didn't, and he went and used it. He stewed on this anger, but it was righteous anger because what was he doing? He was protecting the people and their faith with God. He didn't want people to come to the temple and get the wrong idea of who God was. He was standing up for
righteousness.
And
I think there's a thing called righteous anger and then personal anger. Mm-hmm. And if I read the Bible correctly, we're not supposed to get angry over things that attack us personally. But then on the other hand, we're supposed to get angry about things that come against righteousness and, of course, things that hurt other people. Again, we're living in a world where there's going to be difference in opinions, and people are going to feel very strong about their opinions and try to sometimes push them on us. And what we need to do, and this would have been good in our episode on maturity, we have to learn how to live with this because it's part of life. And as Vince was saying earlier, people can bring things up and we have to control our emotions. But we also have to stand by our convictions. You don't want to ever change your convictions for the sake of peace.
100%.
But be able to say again at Thanksgiving dinner, I don't agree with that. I never will. I really don't argue, but you know what? I can assure you some more of that pumpkin pie.
So good.
And afterwards, you want to go play some horseshoes outside?
Well, I think,
that's the way you go around it.
What you want to avoid is having a spirit of pride, right? You don't want to be prideful and that be your reason for fighting. Your reason for fighting would be that you are standing up for what is right, but you don't have to rub it in. You don't have to hate each other. You don't have to, I love it when I see people that have differences go to lunch together and talk things out.
Isn't that cool?
I love it.
It is.
I think it's the coolest thing ever.
Well,
there's a right way and a wrong way to do it.
I think when it comes to a conflict, each person wants to be right. They want to state their case. This is why I believe it. They want to be right. And you can't both be right, but you can agree to disagree.
There you go.
And as you agree to disagree, it kind of extinguishes it. You're not saying, I've got this over on you or you. It's a fact that we're coming to a point. I've stated my opinion. I don't have to be right. I mean,
sometimes there is no right or wrong.
And so being able to look at each other and go, hey, that's coming to a point where we're going to just go and then we're going to have lunch. We're going to go to a point where we're going to agree to disagree, because if you want to be right, you're going to win the battle and you're going to lose friends. You're going to lose loved ones. You're going to lose colleagues, and then no one's going to want to be around you.
And you're not talking about losing temporarily. You could lose somebody for life.
Yes.
And I have a very simple resolution for those who believe in the book, like we're talking about. We talk about the Bible. And in the Bible, Paul gives us a real solution for conflict, a real solution. And I believe that solution I call it seeing past the human element, seeing past the flesh. In Romans 8:5, it says, "For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh. But those who live according to the Spirit set their minds on the things of the Spirit." There's an art to seeing behind the human element and seeing what's behind what's happening. You know, if somebody yells at me and that's out of character for them, or it's an odd timing kind of thing, my wife and I get in an argument, whatever, I look at it and I say, what's behind that? What is happening in the spiritual realm behind that?
I think there's a lot of hurt too that go into these conversations when people want to fight you on political things or different things. Say, let's take gun control, for example, right? You have complete polar opposite people, and you hope, like you said, Pastor Ron, that at the end of the day, we can all play horseshoes together and be okay, but that doesn't happen to be the case. But like you said, there's a lot of hurt on one side, and sometimes people aren't willing to sympathize or even, come down and understand each other and say, hey, like I can fill you out, and not have to come to a conclusion, like you said, Tom, where you're going to agree to disagree. That's okay. But have some understanding of that person's hurt or what they're going through. You have these sexual assault cases, and a lot of people come at those fights with a lot of hurt and backstory and stuff. And sometimes we just happen to be the person they're going to chew out that day. I'm sure for you, Pastor Ron, you preach a sermon, you say something just a little controversial, and a lot of that's probably coming from backstory and hate, and you're able to go back on Facebook, and I've seen you work through these conversations with people like, hey, I never meant to offend you. I love you. I'm glad you're here. Just be okay with me saying sorry. I didn't mean to offend you.
Just the other day, I had to write someone, and I said, you know what? I am so sorry I hurt you. Please forgive me. Now, I meant what I said, and I can't take that back because I still believe in that, but I am very sorry I hurt you.
Right.
And can we mend that some way?
How many of our battles, our life battles, have spiritual roots?
A lot of them, if not most.
Doesn't Ephesians say our
6:12.
battle's not against flesh and blood? So if you're looking at somebody and they're flesh and blood, that's not your fight.
And then what's our first line of defense against spiritual forces? What do we do?
Yeah.
We pray, right?
That's what we should do.
We pray. We should pray. I mean,
And
really.
then everything too, the backdrop to Christianity, and we especially want to make this true with Valley Bible, is love. Love. Love is the primary thing. How can I get out of this and still love you? How can we have this debate if it's necessary and still have love as the dominating force?
So you taught me something a long time ago. I don't know if you even realize this, but you taught me how to win battles in the shower. Because I used to hear you when you take a shower.
I have a noisy shower.
You would be praying. You'd be taking authority over spirits. You'd be doing some serious work in there. You're not only cleaning your body, you're cleaning everything else. And I do that now too. I mean, if I have my kids are bickering or if something else is going on in my life, I'll get in. When I get in the shower, I start praying. I start praying and I start taking authority. And sometimes it makes for a longer shower, which isn't good. But you have to have that moment in time where you stop and say, what is really going on here?
Right.
Yeah, you do. And blessed are the peacemakers. Somebody brought that verse up. And I always talk about the fine line between what I believe is compromise and being flexible. The other day, a while back, I had a counseling session. And the people I were talking to, their daughter was getting married to a guy that had some little different values. And so they're paying for the wedding, the people I was talking to. And they wanted to have a lot of booze at the reception. And now the people paying for the wedding, they're convicted that we shouldn't do that. They said, we don't want a bunch of drunks. They wanted an open bar. I mean, just everything. And so I thought it was pretty cool because the way they handled it was they went to their daughter and their son-in-law to be and said, we just don't feel good about that. We're paying for the wedding, not just because of the money involved, but because we don't want a drunken brawl. We don't want people getting drunk. So what we will do is we're going to put a bottle of champagne on every table, and we're not providing any more than that. Hopefully one person doesn't drink the whole bottle, but enough for a toast and all that stuff. And they came to what I would call being flexible. Maybe you can call it compromise. And they did it in a lot of love, and I thought it was pretty cool.
Well, compromise is a funny word because it gets a bad rap. I think that we often assume that it's always wrong to compromise, but it's not. It's not wrong at all. I mean, you have to negotiate. You have to compromise. God himself actually engages in compromise with us.
Right.
I think it means
Sometimes.
doing what you have to do to get a peaceful solution without going against your values.
Exactly.
and-
Exactly. That's it right
That's it.
there.
Yeah,
That's
that
it right
is it.
there.
And I had an attorney, a local attorney, tell me one time, compromise is when nobody is happy; they're both giving. So you're coming. This family you're talking about came to an agreement.
Well,
Yes.
it depends, Tom. I
Yes.
mean, if you value the relationship, and you're talking about situations where the relationship is kind of done, but when you value a relationship over the conflict itself, then you should arrive at a place where you compromise and are happy, because you want there to be peace. I mean, blessed are the peacemakers
Sure we
because
do.
they want peace, right?
Sure we do.
They want that to happen.
Well,
That's
well,
not
sitting,
always
sitting at this table today,
easy.
we have different values.
Sure.
We do. For example, and I'm not embarrassed about it, nor am I apologetic. I believe as a mature Christian, I should not drink booze, period. And I believe it's wise for a lot of people to do away with liquor in their lives totally. My reasoning for it, you've all heard it, but I think it goes beyond spiritual convictions. I believe you have little children in the home, and those children are going to grow up doing what you do. If you drink, they're going to drink. You say so often, not you guys, but a lot of people say, well, I handle my booze. We don't get drunk because being drunk is a sin, and we handle it, and on and on and on. I say, that's great. But kids are going to do what you do. They don't have the capability at 16, 17, and 18 to control their booze. And of course, I have to go back on past experiences I have, standing by lots of caskets of teenage kids who were in the car and somebody was drinking that was driving, or they were drinking and driving, and they got killed. And obviously we know that it's a lot bigger chance of being killed on the highway if you're drinking than if you're not. And so for me, I have a strong opinion that liquor should not be in the house, especially when you have small kids. Maybe it's a little different when you're older. Now, that's a strong value I have, but I don't force everyone else to have that value. And I get along very well with people that don't have that value. But if you ever want to argue the point with me or debate it with me, you're not going to sway me over. There's been
Right.
a lot of thought in this,
Right.
but I will also not want to argue with you about it. So is it true that sitting at this table,
Well, Pastor,
we allow each other to have different values?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Pastor, my daughter just got married.
But my values are also changing as I grew up.
As you grow up.
Well, my
Grow
daughter,
up.
my
You
daughter
get
just
older
As
got
I grow up.
my daughter just got married in June. My son-in-law came to me because he knows my values. Before I used to be a drinker before I got saved, and I haven't touched anything since. And my son-in-law, Danny Jimenez, and they're Hispanic, came to me and he goes, Tom, would you have a shot of vodka with my dad and I after I'm married? My dad got this bottle when I was born, and this, that, and the other. And I looked at him, I said, I will. He goes, oh wow, you'll do that? And I said, I will. Did I have to? No.
Right.
Because it didn't happen. But I looked at my son-in-law and I said, he goes, that's really cool.
Yeah,
He goes,
see,
because-
you loved him.
Yeah, I mean, because
Respected his
it was
dad.
a significant thing between him and his dad.
Right.
And as I said, yes, we never did it. I've never asked Danny why we didn't do
Well,
it, but we just never did it.
If you
But-
would have said no, it would have been communicated to them
Yes.
that you care more about
A religious
your
thought
righteous
process.
I mean,
but alcohol's not good for me, and
Right.
I've known that, and I've never drank. And so, but when he said
not
that,
healthy.
it was for a purpose.
See, I was smiling before Tom even answered that because I knew the way he was going to answer it. You might remember when we were in Israel one time, and we went into a store that some Arab people owned, and there was a big holiday. They were celebrating, and they were so glad to see us, trying to make us good deals on shoes.
Yep.
They said, have a drink with us right now. And so all the younger guys were looking at me like, oh, pastor's going to be mad. Before they got their opinion out, I had already drank it.
Yeah.
And they said, you just drank that? I said, yeah, I didn't want to disrespect these people.
I drank it right after you drank it. I was in. I was like, I guess if he's doing it, I'm
he's
in.
doing it.
I'll take on that yoke.
I'll tell a funny story. We were in Mulegé, Pastor and I, on a big missionary trip, and we were at a really nice breakfast place, and one of our pastors ordered a
Coffee.
a Mexican coffee.
You didn't know, right?
And so we're all like, wow. So he's like, oh, this is great. We all had a sip. We go, yeah, this is really good. So after we finished our first one, somebody, we say, oh yeah, we'll have another one of those. Somebody in our group said,
Picture.
hey, they put tequila in that. And we go, oh, maybe we won't. So it's not, so it's when you come up with a hard, fast line like that,
Right.
Sometimes you'll do something and not know.
But do you
it.
remember too? Yeah, they put tequila in it. Texas said, "Oh, they have liquor in that," and so we're going to take it away. I said, "Well, before you take it away, can I have one more cup?" That's really good stuff, man.
It
Oh,
was.
that's so funny.
Basically, what we're talking about here, I would define it as we live by the spirit of the law, not the
Yes.
letter.
Right.
And the spirit of the law values relationships over self-righteousness.
Exactly. And then
Right.
again, I've said it before, there's a fine line between holiness and legalism.
Yeah.
I like to think we're holy, but we're not legalistic.
Right.
And that is huge.
Yeah,
Well,
my wife and I, we might have a glass of wine at dinner or something, but we've really, really, really pulled back on all that because of health reasons.
Yes.
It's not healthy, and it is easy to drink 2 drinks or 3 drinks, and then all of a sudden you're just like in a bad state of mind. It's not good. It's not healthy for your mind, not healthy for your body. And so I think that as we grow, our values do change. Sometimes I wonder, why my elders have these values, but now I know they've gone.
Yeah, and I
through
think a
the
thing too,
experiences.
Josh, when you get older and you don't have kids in the home, some values change too.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, for example, I might watch a movie on TV that has a lot of cussing and cursing in it. Maybe it's a war movie.
Right.
And that's the way they talked in those days. But if I had kids in the home, I would not watch it.
Well,
But if there's
right.
no kids there, I might watch it.
Like a war movie with no cussing would be kind of funny,
Oh,
right? It'd
it wouldn't be real.
Hey, Fooey, you know what? I'm gonna kick
Got it.
your BUTT.
They spell it.
Got it.
Yeah, they spell it. Well, one of the things I want to go back to, you talked about love, and you said we have to be loving over all things. And I think some people get that confused too, because part of having relationships and differences is you tell the truth in love. And people don't understand that. Just now you're talking about drinking. And that's easy to accept from you because it's coming from a loving place. The things that you talked about when you talked about not drinking, you're super concerned about kids losing their lives.
Yes.
You're super concerned about parents. That's not coming from a place of being, self-righteous, but that's coming out of a place of love. You're like, I want to see you live your best life, and this is why I'm going to tell you this
Well,
information.
the community,
and I think that's big.
The community that we're in has the most DUIs in the nation.
That just came out yesterday. Yeah.
and that's staggering. I mean, that's terrible.
But I've actually stood by the caskets many times,
Yes.
looking at that 17-year-old going, if you were raised in my home, you wouldn't be in this casket
Right.
probably.
So if you do drink and you decide that's part of your value system, you're okay with it. Don't drink and drive, man.
Yeah.
Please.
Yes. And teach your kids the
Please.
same.
Take an Uber. You have no reason to drink and drive.
Yeah,
man.
Josh, I think it goes deeper than that. It's responsibility.
It is
Because you
responsibility.
talked about having a gun in your home.
Yes.
And I've got guns in my home. And I was brought up, Pastor Ron and I were brought up in a different area, and I think you were brought up in a different area where our guns were more in the open. But now we're living in a society that is saying that you shouldn't do that. So all my guns are locked up.
My guns were carried in a gun rack in my pickup truck.
Yes. Yeah.
Right there in the open,
they
right
sold
there in
them
the
like
cab.
they sold them like that.
Gun
they sold
racks.
the pickups
Well,
like that.
now
Yeah.
I carry a non-lethal weapon.
Yeah.
And that's seriously, I do. Just because you never know if you might need it.
So
but
it's
I also
respon-
carry one of those.
but
Yeah.
it's responsibility.
right.
And I think that's a good word to have. We have to be responsible. I always tell people when I get into a conflict, I go, we have to both accept 50% responsibility of being here. But I think we both have to
That's so
accept,
huge.
we have to both accept 100% of our attitude and
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
emotions.
Let me ask you guys
because
this.
they're ours.
Let me ask you guys this. This is a real question that I have. What triggers you to anger?
Unfulfilled expectations.
Okay.
I have another expectation, and I've been through it because I was court ordered to 2 anger management classes before I
Oh,
came
wow.
to the Lord.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was bad.
So
But so I knew all the tricks. So I knew that my expectations were always the thing that would fire me up, and I was roid raging too because I was a steroid addict. So I had all this, and then once my expectations didn't get met, I mean that's just a red light, on my body. So I had to start to realize I needed to lower or make a realistic expectation, and it's still to this day.
I think people that make fun of something that I'm very serious about in my values, they start making fun of it or trying to poke irrelevant, irrational holes in it.
Right.
It makes me angry.
Interesting. Vince, what
I
do you
think it's when people jump to assumptions, like, or they just want to assume whatever. Like you might be in a situation, especially when you're talking about conflict with somebody
Right.
else, and they come to you and you say, well, this, and this, and you're like, well, hold
Yeah.
on, like, and if somebody comes to you and the young kids say aggro when they're upset, when they're mad, and they start off a conversation like that, I think that when I'm like, you want to fight, like if somebody
Yeah.
comes in, it's so hard for me to backtrack and not be angry when somebody's angry already off the gate. You know?
My big trigger is when I feel like somebody's trying to control me or trying to
yeah.
to make me do something I don't want to
Manipulate
do. I
you,
get
yeah.
angry, and so the reason I brought that up is because we all have specific triggers, and they're different. They're different for all of us.
They are.
Because it's based on our past. It's based on
our personalities.
what we went through, and our personalities. And so I think recognizing your own trigger is a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Because then you know when that happens, you know the feeling's going to come. And you know, psychologists say that our thoughts they're kind of like on a conveyor belt. They come, but then they go. And when they go, the feeling goes with them. You know, and so if you can be angry and not sin, that's okay.
Can I
That's
ask this
okay.
question? Do you guys have a technique to lower your anger?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I
have
do.
A few, but
I
yeah.
do.
What's yours?
What I've been taught is once you have that adrenaline in your system, your cognitive thinking goes because your blood vessels constrict. So I will,
Lizard brain takes over. they
yes,
say.
so I will breathe. I ask for 10 seconds. My wife and kids know it. I don't leave the room. I stand there and I control myself, and I de-escalate till I can start thinking. But it's something I have to do.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an interesting question.
It'd be convenient for me to leave the room, but usually my wife's following me.
Yeah.
I'm like, don't follow me. So I have to take responsibility to de-escalate myself.
I approach it a little differently. I go to prayer right away, and I let my anger out in prayer. And I go, God, right now, I am really mad, angry, God. How dare them do this? But Father God, remind me that you put up with me during these times, and I have to put up with them. I vent all my anger in prayer. And when I come back, I feel vented, and I also feel like I have recollected my thoughts.
Mine sometimes is just right in the moment. You know, so I don't have that time.
Yeah.
Or I'll,
I
in
can't
my
do it
head.
in the moment. I have to almost say, hey, can we resume this conversation tomorrow? Because I need to get
Do
that
you
time.
think society's scaled right now to push us against each other more than unite
Yes.
us together? Like, you know, when you watch ads on TV, do you feel like they're intentionally trying to divide us apart further and further and further and make us upset to a place where we get angry? So there is no middle ground. There is no
Well, let's be
resolution.
honest. It's financially good for certain institutions for us to be fired up and angry about something because then we'll take a
fighting on
side
both sides,
and then
right.
we'll, you know.
What about last week for the elections? All those commercials on TV.
Right.
Oh, those get you up, get you angry. Going, how dare them say that?
Right.
And then you watch the opposite argument and you go, oh, huh.
Well, and they run right after each other.
Yeah.
Right.
One runs for 30 seconds and the other one, you're like, oh, if you watch the whole minute, you'll be
We
okay.
could turn a corner here because Vince asked a very good question. Today, it starts in the church sometimes. There's divisions in the church. We call them denominations. Churches, you know, they divide over issues and opinions, and then they form splinter groups around those differences. And sometimes they fight each other. I mean, this in the church world, I mean, what name are you baptized in? Some trivial things, some important things, some trivial. What name were you baptized in, as if that really matters? Speaking in tongues or not speaking in tongues? Women in leadership, predestination. What do you think about the Trinity? You know, it's this big thing. What do you think about the Trinity? Well, I think all of us believe in a triune God, but some people in the religious world, if you don't think about it the same way as me,
Right.
then you know what? You're a heretic, which they're saying without probably thinking about it, that I've formed an opinion based on how I see Scripture, and your opinion doesn't matter. It's only my opinion that counts. And so all I'm saying is, if the church can't get it right, how can we expect society to get it right?
So I messed up the other day. Some Jehovah's Witnesses knocked on our door. Did I
and
tell
you
this?
answered.
You told me this.
Did I
but
tell
you,
the story?
You
I
didn't
don't
tell
think
the
I
story
told
on
the
the
story.
podcast. No.
So I didn't answer, but my wife did. I was getting out of the shower, and I see my wife speaking to these Jehovah's Witnesses, and my little daughter's standing there listening to them. And so I immediately felt like they trespassed. I'm like, you're on my property, and you're talking to my little 5-year-old who's learning about God, who's learning about Jesus, about your ways, you know, and how dare you do that, you know? And so I just kind of ignored it, but my wife finished talking to them, and I went and got ready, and I came in the living room, and she was sitting down with my 5-year-old with the pamphlet. And I walked right over, I grabbed the pamphlet out of my wife's hand and I ripped it up. And I said, that's what we do with this. And then my little daughter started crying. And I realized at that moment that I messed up. I messed up because I didn't assess the situation very well. And I didn't realize what my wife's intention was, because my wife was wise enough to realize that all my 5-year-old daughter sees are two elderly men talking about Jesus. And so she was trying to take a much simpler a route in basically saying, yeah, it's good to talk about Jesus, and then move on from there. And so I messed up. I screwed up, and I had to come back and say, you know what? I'm sorry, I messed up. I talked to my daughter. I said, those men were nice. And then I went and talked to the men and I said, hey, and they were really nice to me. I said, hey guys, look, I would appreciate it if you don't come to my house because my daughter is young and she's learning about God.
And how they respond to that?
Well, very well. One of the older men said, well, it's not our intention to hurt families at all. I said, well, I appreciate that. Thank you. And it was respectful and it was good. And I doubt they'll be back. If they are, then maybe we might have another conversation. But it was impatience and immaturity that kind of took over in the moment.
I don't know anything about that because I've always been real mature with this stuff. For example, several years back, we lived on an acreage, and some Jehovah's Witnesses drove all the way up my driveway, and I was busy doing something, and in the moment, I gave way to my emotions. And so they came, and I said, I don't want to talk. I'm just going to pray with you right now, knowing they wouldn't let me pray with them. And so anyway, because that's just not what they do. They don't want you praying with them. And I kept pushing it. And finally said, we're just leaving. I said, that's fine. You drove up my driveway. And so as they got in their car, as they were backing out, I was running behind them with my hands on their hood, praying for them and all the way out. And they were just really, they were writing my address down and telling other people to avoid that address. So we all do stupid things sometimes.
Yeah.
And that was years ago, and I've learned from that. Obviously, I didn't have any kids around like you did.
Well, it put me in a good place because I went back to the drawing board, which, I like I said at the beginning, I think most of these issues are resolved when you're not in conflict, when you're not involved in the moment, when you're not emotional. In the mornings, I've been praying more, meditating more, writing more, reading more, and really trying to internalize it and just trying to have more patience.
Well, we're learning. We're all in the process. We're on a journey to maturity.
It pretty much
We're
comes
learning
down
by
to
our mistakes.
Right, for sure. So many times we do live in the flesh, right?
Yes.
Versus the spirit. But if you live in the spirit, what's the fruit of the spirit? It's love,
Joy, peace, patience. But Josh, here's the thing.
Self-control.
That is the self-control.
Kindness.
That is the fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah.
So as growing Christians on this journey, we don't live in the Spirit all the time.
Right.
Our goal is to live in the Spirit 24/7. We kind of go in and out. But maybe we should make a lane change right here. And I'm thinking, how do we, give me some practical ways. How do we live with differences? How do we overcome this thing? I'll start off with the first one. You said it, agree to disagree, and that yet love one another.
Yeah. Well, so one thing, a lot of people talk about freedom of rights and all these things, or rights to freedom of speech and our rights. If I don't allow somebody else to have their rights and their freedom of speech, then I shouldn't be allowed to have my own. But if I allow them to do their thing, then that frees me up to do my thing, and being able to speak my mind. That's what this country's about. I mean, that's what
now you're hitting a hot spot.
Society's about.
You're hitting a hot spot because culture today is not thinking this through. Transgender issues and some of these people involved. There are certain groups today out there that demand that the Christian church agrees with the way they see things, but they won't agree with the way we see things. It's not what should be done. In other words, we demand that you accept us. Well, we also demand that you accept us. We think differently, on and on. There's a lot of hypocrisy in that.
Right.
And so, for example, let me give an example here. I had a friend come and stay a couple of days with us some time back. And he's a homosexual individual, and he has some other beliefs that are not in accordance with mine. But he spent a couple days with us, and I discussed some of his values that are very far away from what my values are. And he gave me new understanding into a lot of things. And I saw things differently in some ways than I saw them before he came. And we spent 2 days together, loving one another, but agreeing to disagree. But just being around him and being able to have open dialogue caused me to rethink through some things that I had just automatically thought was wrong before. So I think that's growing up.
It's easy to hate an image of a human. It's much harder to hate the human.
There you go.
Right.
Why in the war, back in the 60s stuff, did we have slang names or we had terms for the enemy? We wanted to dehumanize them.
Right.
We did not want to make them human. But how many war stories have we had that go something like this? We're out in the battlefield. We approach a young man, 18, and we're supposed to kill him. And we see the tears in his eyes, and he becomes human all of a sudden. And we go, I don't know if I can do this.
Right.
Because now he's a human in my mind. So there's a lot of things we have to do. But I think number one is agree to disagree, yet love one another. And number two, talk more about what we do agree on than what we don't agree on.
And I think that is so true, Pastor, because I think when you get down to it, you do agree more than we disagree. We get so passionate about that one or two things. I've got a friend that I love to talk to, but she definitely thinks different than I do, and she has notoriety where we live, and it's just amazing because we can disagree, but the minute we talk about Jesus, we're on the same
Right.
page,
You have it in
baby.
common.
And then it turns into this conversation that gets beyond that problem.
Right.
And we start talking about how Christ changed us both, and we still have different opinion. So when we leave, we're still disagreeing
Right.
on subjects, but we're agreeing on something that's bigger than what
Tom,
we're
just
talking
like
about.
this homosexual friend that stayed with me a couple of days. I love this guy dearly, and I haven't seen him for a while. And so I don't believe that the way he's living is a good way to live. I think it's the behavior is wrong. It's wrong, definitely wrong. But we started talking at the end a lot about Christianity. He's coming to God, wanting to learn more about God. And we spent more time talking about that than we did our differences.
Do you think that's, just Jesus choosing the disciples almost by design, just how diverse and different they
boy.
were? You just go right into that. And they had to find commonality. They had to find some unity because there's no way you get a tax collector
And a zealot.
some fishermen, some zealots
They
together.
had political differences.
Yeah,
They were on the
and
opposite
think-
side of the table,
And think
man.
about where they were raised. They were raised in different places. They came from different upbringings, depending on how one parent believed might have been different.
Yes.
And Jesus brought all these different people
it's-
together and meshed them together.
You know what's funny about that group is the one time that you see in the Bible, there's a record of them fighting and bickering.
Right.
It's over who's the best. Who does Jesus like the most,
Right.
right?
Right.
And you think about that, and you go back to the very beginning of the Bible, the very first conflict that arose out of jealous anger, Cain and Abel. God looked down and he
Right.
had regard for
good.
Abel's offering, but not for Cain's.
Right.
We got the
mob's calling.
the mob's calling.
That just told on me right there, didn't
That's
it?
that's your
I forgot to silence my phone.
that's your ringtone.
You got to
for-
see the people in the store.
Is that for
this
Mom, by the way?
Older Italian guy, and the Godfather goes off. The ring goes off. But
It's funny.
But yeah, the
you see what I'm
disciples,
saying?
no,
Like,
that's true.
yeah, jealous anger is a thing, and I don't struggle with jealousy, but I struggle with a lot of other things, and I think the solutions are the same. You
But-
have to look beyond the actual conflict.
But why did it work with the disciples? Why were they able to,
Commonality
right?
in
but
Christ,
but also
following Jesus.
following Jesus,
Yeah.
right? It all came back to that because there's no way they had to sit around and you had fishermen talking. There's no way they were just
Well,
like they were into the same thing,
the zealot wanted to kill the tax guy.
Yes.
right?
Because he's a traitor.
Yeah, he's a traitor.
Right.
And a traitor to their people. And so, and again, here's a question. You probably won't be able to answer it. Why did Jesus call probably teenagers as his disciples? I mean, there's probably many reasons for it. But these guys, sometimes we see how immature they were with their attitudes and everything. But they were 16, 17, 18 years old, possibly.
You know why? They were still mendable and moldable.
There you go.
And that, what's
Yes.
huge about that, especially talking about indifferences. As we get older, we have to be willing, and again, not bend on our moral beliefs or what we, but be willing to change who we're becoming. Sometimes we're going to find out when we shouldn't have done that, right? You talk about Pastor Ron, you're like, we used to drink water from the water hose. You don't drink water from the water hose anymore. Why?
we're educated.
We're
now.
educated
We-
because we know that the plastics cost. You do
So-
all these, so you did all these things when you're younger, but if
Right.
you're willing to learn and keep learning when you're older, it's going to help you be able to have these great
So going back to
relationships.
going
with
back to the
people.
idea of the disciples, young men together, they're different, right? The tax collector, the zealot. I have a story that kind of goes along with this. When I was in high school, my football coach was Joe New, right? And we went on a trip and we stayed the night, and he wanted us to have more unity as a team. And so he put me in the room with the two Mexican taggers, okay? Clarence and Frankie. Love you guys if you guys are out there listening.
One of them's a
Clarence is a
pastor.
pastor now,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah.
Very good guy. But they're taggers. They would go around tagging. And I remember that night we actually became close friends because I was laying there and I could hear them whispering. They were going to come up and they were going to tag on me with a Sharpie on my back. And so they came up and then I just I jumped at them and we had a good laugh. And then I said, listen, guys, next time you're out tagging, this is my symbol. I drew a happy face. I'm not kidding. A couple weeks later, they said, "Hey, go to the corner of Mount Vernon and Brundage," and I did, and there was a happy
Oh
face.
no! Oh no!
So hey,
Oh, no.
it was all wrong, but it was at the same time, it was the East Side, and I gained some respect from those guys because they saw that I was human. They saw that I was just like them. You know,
And
I'm a
I go
kid.
back
We're
because
having
again,
fun.
I want to correct something I said. We assume the disciples might have been 18, 19, 20. I don't know. They were young,
Young
because
right.
when Jesus had to pay taxes, it looked like him and Peter were the only two old enough to pay taxes. But again, they were young. And so we have to factor that in when we
Right.
read the Gospels. So another thing that I'd written down on how are we going to agree to disagree, how are we going to learn to get along with the diversity of opinions, is I wrote, give people a right to have their own opinion.
Yep.
I think this is huge. People tell me today that, or they don't tell me, they might ask me a question about, these people that believe differently than us. And am I okay with that? I think everybody has a right to live their life the way they want to live it on the earth. The Lord gave us, 70, 75 years?
Yep.
Live it the way you want to live it. But do realize that you're going to stand before Him in judgment someday. So you better live it right. But everybody has a right to their opinions. I have a right to have opinions and be dogmatic about them. And people shouldn't refuse me that right. But I should allow them to have the same right.
Well, as a Christian, and I was a young person. I'm not sure if I'm a young person anymore, but
To me, you are.
more of middle age. I grew to really understand that idea of allowing people their space, because even if they're coming into the faith and they're doing or saying things that you disagree with, you have to trust God, right, to be the change in their life,
Yes.
right? I can't sit back and try to change them, because how often does that work?
No.
Right? I'm going to try to change. I'm going to tell you you're wrong all the time. Well, they'll just eventually distance themselves from me because of my negativity.
And the more you try to tell them they're wrong, the more
Right.
they're going to rebel,
Yeah,
probably.
exactly. And so a better way is to say, if somebody asks you a question about a behavior and it's wrong, a good way to say, well, what does the book say?
Yeah.
What does it say?
Well, giving people a chance, a space to work it out, but also be a support for them. Say, hey, you're working. I'm here for you. More than likely, they're always going to go back to you when they're in that need and they do want to change.
I have a secret. I'm going to tell everybody my secret right now. I have a lot of love and respect from people, and there's a reason why. It's because I see beyond their behaviors, and I see who they could be and who they
Possibilities.
should be.
The possibility.
Yeah, I see who God has called them to be, and I see that it's just a few tweaks, just a few little things that they can do differently. They can be this person. I see that.
Right.
And so I will befriend people sometimes that other people are like, man, why are you friends with that guy? Well, that guy's not a good guy, or that guy's annoying, or
Right.
that guy's, this and that. It's because I see something that God sees.
You know,
Successful people are those that can see beyond that.
Yeah.
you know what I try to do a lot,
huge.
and this is just kind of my wheelhouse and where I love to do this stuff. Sometimes finding common ground, and we've talked about that earlier. But sometimes my common ground is the gym. I'll come into a gym and I can see somebody that we just don't even believe the same way. But once we're in the gym, we have a common
Yep.
thing we're doing. We're both working out. It's like, hey, how you doing? You're looking good. And I love the thought process in Romans 14, 1 through 4. It says that we're supposed to accept believers who are weak in faith.
Weak in faith.
And I could even throw another work on that, young in faith. Because I think sometimes when people are young, and you look at kids coming out of college, they're very opinionated. And I love that. I mean, I've got young girls that have come through college, very opinionated. The older they get, the time they hit the workforce, or what do we call it, the real world, their opinions change. I loved it when my girls got a job and they said, "Dad, I got my first paycheck. Who's FICA?" And I go, and I'm like,
Right.
I go, well, now you're paying taxes.
Yeah.
And they go, we never knew that before.
right.
So I'm just saying, so as you do that, because it says
Well,
we're not supposed to argue with them
Where
on
would
what
the
they say.
church be today if believers only accepted perfect believers or people
Empty.
that got it right?
Empty.
Josh, I wouldn't have liked me probably when I was 35 years old.
I
I,
mean-
wouldn't have liked me, but I was on a journey of changing. And very often when we hire young employees today, I might say something like this, I'm hiring you now because I want to invest in you while your value is down, because I know someday you'll be worth more than I could probably even pay for. Seeing people not at the stage they're at right now only, but knowing that, hey, you were once 35, you were once
Can I-
30, you were once 20.
Can I say one more thing that's I think is huge, and it just came to me, and I really think this is a big issue. When people are angry with other people, especially if God has their number, like we say, like God has called them, He's shining a light on them, He wants them to come to Him. They get mad at everyone else, but really they're not fighting everyone else. They're fighting with God Himself. And you think about Jacob, when he wrestled with God, who changed? Was it God that changed? No, it was Jacob. And he had a limp for the rest of his life because he wrestled with God. But that was a reminder. It was a blessing,
It was a
really.
blessing.
Because it was a reminder of the fact that God Himself cares more about our heart and more about our
Diversity of opinion is good for us. Iron sharpens iron.
And so some of you might be out there, and I've been in this place, so I'm speaking from a place of understanding. You might be running from God. You might be angry with God. You might be fighting with God. And in the end, you will be the one that changes. Just give into it. Don't force God's hand to the point where He has to dislocate a bone in your body. Because I've had my hip dislocated, and you know what happens? You're paralyzed. You can't move. You can't move. And all of a
So
sudden,
many things you can't do.
all the things you wanted to control in life, you cannot control. And so when God wrestles with us, He ends up taking our lives and putting us in a space where we can't move at all because we need to learn to rely on Him. And once we do, then we have more freedom than we would ever even imagine.
I want to double down too at what Tom said. I just want to bring it up real quick. He talked about common ground. I think that's really good advice too, because I think a lot of times there's going to be times, like you said, you're going to have to fight, and you don't want to have to fight in enemy territory, and you don't want to have to fight, or where they're fighting. You want to be able to find common ground. I think sometimes you can get through some of those resolutions by going on a bicycle ride with somebody, going on a walk with somebody, going to, like you said, going to coffee with somebody, because those are the times where you're able just to
How important are friends and community?
Yeah, huge.
And how often do we have disagreements or we've disappointed our friends?
Probably all the time. Yeah.
I've disappointed my friends, and I hate it. I hate it.
Yeah.
It bothers me. But the fact that we stick together through those trials is huge. It's
Right.
everything.
Well, I remember one time my wife wanted me to work something out with my son-in-law, who wasn't my son-in-law then. And I said, fine, we'll go to coffee. She goes, well, why you want to go to coffee? Why don't you meet here? I go, I want common ground. If we meet at my house,
There
it's
you go.
my house.
Yep.
If we go to his house, it's his house.
Right.
We can be in my, I go, so we're just going to go to common ground. My wife blew up my phone, and I finally picked it up. I go, hold on, Danny, we're just getting along. I go, what are you doing? She goes, how's it going? I go, going great. What do you want? And I put it down. But I mean, we met, we had coffee.
I like that.
It-
I
it-
think there's a coffee shop called Common Grounds.
Is there?
I feel like there is.
But-
If
but-
there
If
isn't,
not, you ought to start
yeah,
with.
you ought to
Yeah.
start it.
But,
Right.
but I'm just saying, it was one of those things where sometimes you can at least have peace surrounding what you're going to do.
You know what I love about it is if I go to Starbucks and I sit there and order my coffee, they're not asking me if I'm a Republican or a Democrat. They're not asking me if I'm a Christian or if I'm a non-Christian. They're not asking me what I believe. They're just making my coffee, And it is nice to have the community that still serves you, even though you might believe differently.
You could start. I ran into a little barista today. Her name was Paris. Her name was spelled different, and I go, oh, is that Paris? She goes, yeah, it is. And I said, what a neat name. I love unique names, and it would just it's so disarming.
Right.
Yeah, disarming. That's a good word, Tom.
It is.
I was at a Bible study years ago in Las Vegas, and a very, very intelligent person with a very influential job was there. And right away, you could tell he wanted to pick a fight with me. And he started just talking about some things that he knew I wouldn't agree with. And he went on and on and on. And finally, I just looked at him and I said, man, you are one smart dude. Man, you've done your homework. I'm pretty impressed. Disarmed him totally. From
Right.
there on, we got along in the Bible study.
And I'll go with this because I think sometimes being direct is okay too. Because my wife will come home sometimes, and my wife will be there, and I go, "You want to fight?" She goes, "I do." I mean, instead of messing around.
I hope I never come home to that.
No.
That's a whole that's a
I-
whole other thing.
Because when I did,
You
I
disarmed her.
I said,
Yeah, you
I
did.
go, how do we get here? You know,
Yes.
Yeah.
I go, how do we get here? And I think sometimes, you can cut through it. And Pastor and I've had that conveation many
Yes,
times
yes.
where we come and go, how do we get here?
Yeah, how do we get here?
That's the wrong response. You should. What did I do?
That's kind of it.
Right. What did I do?
Sometimes, Tom, you're right. We do want to fight. And what do we do? How do we beat that? And I think
That's
that
good.
you told me one day, Dad, and I believe this to be true, and I've seen it happen in my own life. Anger is a habit.
Have it.
It's a habit. If you think angry thoughts
You're gonna be
all
angry.
day and you come into a conflict with somebody, usually it's somebody that you care about, right? It's usually not some stranger, could be.
Because they're
but-
not going to leave.
I mean, we have a friend who just had a conflict with a stranger and did not end well. It did not end well. He ended up in the hospital. So,
Stabbed.
Yeah, so you got to be careful when you're out and about. But the biggest issue, I think, in the church and in life is that we fight with those we love because we're angry about other things and we allow those thoughts
Right.
to continue to stay in our head.
There was a song, "You Only Hurt the Ones You Love."
Yes.
Yes, and because they're the only ones that want to put up with it,
Right.
And they'll go that extra mile,
Yep.
for that also to let you change. And I think this is so important. If you're out there listening and you don't have a relationship with Jesus, I mean, I think you need to consider it, because considering it is the only thing that will change you. Because people don't change just because of change; they change from the inside out. And it takes time. So you
Christians especially know
Yeah.
they're growing. They're
Yes.
they're on a journey with God.
Yes.
And we know we're growing. But let me say something else too. I think this is a valuable thing to say in this conversation, is that when you go through life, someone once said that 25% of the people you meet might like you, but they can be talked out of liking you. Another 25% of the people you meet might not like you, but they could be talked into liking you. Another 25% of the people, they don't like you. They're never going to like you. No matter what you do, what you say, they're not going to like you. And another 25% will love you no matter what.
Aren't
And
those people that don't like you, isn't that just an opportunity to serve God, to love them?
it's a challenge,
It's a huge
big challenge.
It's huge.
Here's an opportunity, God, you've given me to love somebody that hates me and probably is always going to hate me.
Because loving somebody that's easy to love.
But it helps me, Josh. It helps me sometimes when somebody's coming after me, disagreeing, that I can go, they're in that 25% that will never like me no matter what I do. So this one I need to just walk away from with a
Right.
smile, love them, and not put
because
myself in this anymore.
You can't waste your energy on trying to make somebody like you. You can pray for them. You can hope the best. Like you said on the way, you don't have any enemy. You hope the best for everyone. I hope you're successful. I hope you won the $1.9 billion lottery. I hope the best for you. But I can't spend energy trying to make you like me. Like you said, if I know you're never going to like me and it's not going to help me further the kingdom of God or further my purpose or further the thing that I'm trying to do in my life.
Well,
so I
you
think
have
that's huge.
to take care of your own garden. You know, you
Yeah.
have to cultivate your own life, and what's healthy for you is important, because if you are healthy, I'm getting into this whole self-care thing. If you're healthy yourself, then you can be there for other people.
Yeah, and I think I want to say to somebody out there listening, possibly, don't change your opinions that you really feel convicted about for the sake of unity.
Yeah.
Just learn to agree to disagree, because I know some people out there are a little weaker, and sometimes they might be tempted to say, I will change my opinion about this so we can have unity. Don't do that.
You know what's funny is it's by design that our country has two political parties that oppose each other. I listened to a TED Talk by Jonathan Haidt on this exact subject, and he talks about how both sides need to coexist in order for there to be balance. And I've always thought that was interesting, and I always thought, well, political power goes back and forth, you know. but in the end, we need each other, even to balance each other out. If you're fighting well and you're fighting right, then hopefully you are actually resolving conflict.
Well, Josh, let me go back to what I said and finish it. We were in a church denomination called the International Church of Foursquare, and they had certain belief systems, and we went in pretty much in agreement with them on their doctrinal positions. As time went by, we started changing. Knowledge is progressive. And so we went to pull out of the organization. I went to them and I said, you guys have these beliefs that differ than ours. It's different than ours. And I would love to change those beliefs. So I just get along with you because you're really cool people. But I said, would you respect me if I changed my beliefs just to get along with you? You would no longer respect me. And so can we just kind of separate loving one another and agreeing to disagree because we no longer believe the way you believe? And it was a beautiful outcome, just gorgeous.
Earlier I talked about Jesus and how he got angry and he flipped the tables and made a whip, and he whipped, and he was righteously angered because they were making God's temple into a marketplace instead of a temple. And I think about that, and I think about the contrast of the moments where Jesus, they say he slipped through the crowd. In those moments, he was just getting away. He was running away. He was fleeing. Sometimes it's best just to flee.
Josh, I said something Sunday. I said something Sunday. We're talking about good fruit and bad fruit. Good fruit usually is really good because it's in season.
Do you think Jesus was a coward for running away?
No, not at all.
No,
not at all. He was smart. But I was going to say, I made the point Sunday.
Okay.
I made the point that fruit is good in its season. And there's a season to walk away. There's a season to stand your ground.
Yeah.
And as we mature, hopefully, we'll begin to have more discernment about those seasons going, this is one where I need to turn some tables over.
Well,
this is one where I need to walk away.
And if our battle truly is a spiritual one, right? If it is, then what better way for the enemy to get us entangled by entangling us in a conflict?
Yes.
Right? So many times we could win by just walking.
Very often, I feel like God's telling me, right now it's time to walk away with a smile.
Yeah.
Just walk away with a smile. The longer you stay here, the more this thing's going to escalate.
And I have a temper, so like if I get challenged, my first response is not to walk away. My first response is to challenge back. I have to check myself.
I had something happen over the summer, and it speaks into this. I've been married before. It's something that you guys haven't experienced. So I have a group of people who don't like me because I'm no longer with my ex-wife. And so I was in the gym with my daughter, and my daughter is a lot like me, my daughter Taylor. She's very aggressive, that she's had to be with her sports. And so she said, Dad, that blonde lady over there is staring at you. I go, I know she's staring at me. And she goes, what's wrong with her? I go, I think she's one of my ex-wife's friends. She goes, well, we should go over there and talk to her. I go, no, honey, we're not going to do it because she lives in that 25% that is never going to like me.
No matter what.
No matter what. And she goes, well, I don't like this. I go, honey, well, we're going to finish our workout and then we're going to smile and we're going to leave. And we did. And my daughter asked me why I did that. And I go, honey, that's the battle you can't win. I'm not even going to fight that battle because, I don't want to bring you into that because, there's no need. It hasn't involved you. And I'm just going to choose to let that woman have her opinion of me. And it doesn't affect my life. I haven't seen her in 35 years.
And
I moved out.
Every single circumstance is different.
Yeah.
Right?
And my daughter came out and my daughter's like, okay. And I hope I left my daughter with something.
Well, you walked in wisdom that day.
She was wanting to take up my cause.
Yeah.
And I was saying, honey, it's okay. You don't have to fight my battle.
Right.
But it was funny because I had noticed it earlier. And the person was wanting a little bit of interaction.
Right.
And I just kept.
They wanted a conflict. They wanted to fight that day.
They wanted to get across a point, and they did. And it even got to my daughter without a word said. But we just walked away.
I have a story of the gym. I remember, Dad, you remember the story. There was a guy who was giving me a hard time at the gym. I would go to the gym, and he would walk by and say things to me. He would look at me. He'd make fun of me. He would laugh at me. All these different things. And this happened like over a 2-3 week period where I was like, I don't even want to go to the gym anymore. And I'm like, am I going to have to fight this guy?
Right.
What the heck is going on? The dude ends up getting saved at the church a few weeks later.
That's crazy.
And so I thought that was really, and then he talked to me and he was really nice. And I thought, okay, this is weird because this is obviously a spiritual battle. God, he's wrestling with God right now. He's not wrestling with me. He's wrestling with God. And so every circumstance is different. And so if I would have punched the guy, maybe he wouldn't have come to the church.
Bottom
I don't
line
know.
is, we go back again. Love is the quality we want to pursue all
and
the
if
time.
you walk by the Spirit, he will teach you
He
how to
will.
do that. In
I
the
mean,
moment.
when I went back and shared my Jehovah's Witness story, I didn't handle that with love like you did. You handled it in a more mature way.
Well,
But that was decades
First, not
ago.
so
I've grown a lot since then.
After you
But if
tore the
we
book
just
up.
keep as a backdrop, no matter how different our opinions are, and no matter how worked up we are about our side of the story, if we just keep love as the backdrop,
Yeah.
how can we get out of this thing and still love one another? Can we stop and pray in the middle of a discussion and refocus things? So love. That's it. That's the bottom line. If we love people with everything we have, love the Lord God with all our heart, soul, and mind, and our neighbors, ourselves, we'd get through conflict in a lot better way and diversity of
Josh,
opinions.
you told me something years ago, and I say years ago, probably 10 years ago. You may have forgot it, but it impacted me, and I've shared it with many others. You said, Tom, no one's going to get mad at you for loving them too much.
Never.
Too much. And I did. I was like, that's so correct. I mean, that you know, they're not going to say quit doing that. You know.
Well, I think, and I know we're going to end this up, but the seasons things is huge, and I just can't get that off my mind. I think if you find yourself, you're always in a season and you're always flipping tables, I think it's good to go back and be self-aware. Like, why am I always flipping these tables? Why am I always fighting? Because you can find yourself just caught in this constant loophole fighting, and your season has to change. Seasons change, so you can't always be fighting.
there's an irony in it when a parent wants a child to change and they become angry and nagging toward that child. It causes that child to flee and rebel even more, like you talked about earlier, Dad.
Right.
It goes against you. That's the irony of it. Instead, fight the urges. Fight those triggers and say, what's going on with me? Why am I feeling this way? And realize that, like you said, Tom, like loving people is the way. It really is. And it's not always easy to do.
And we go right back to our beginning. Loving people is the way.
Yep.
And we have to learn to agree to disagree with a loving spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it means walking away.
It does.
So anyway, we love you guys. Thank you for listening this week. We will be back next week with another podcast. Holidays are here. Good luck.
Good luck. Yeah. and be prepared. God bless
Bye,
you.
guys. See ya.
Bye-bye.
You'll find that little piece of you that you can call your own. You got your mama's sunshine, you got your daddy's rain. You're like a piece of heaven in a hurricane, and it's bubbling over like sweet champagne. You got your mama's sunshine, you got your daddy's rain. You got your mama's sunshine, you got your daddy's rain.